This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. First meeting of the season, so nice to see people. Big welcome to new people joining or perhaps soon to join the committee. In usual fashion, we've got the agenda up here. I'll read through the agenda. I have one small change to suggest. Then we'll vote to approve the agenda, and then we'll jump into things. We'll do, I think, after we get going, to some introductions. I think a little bit of that happened informally, but thought we could do just a little bit more of that, with people just taking 30 seconds to say just a little bit about, anything you want, where you live in town, how you live in town, anything you just want to share to just kind of help us get to know each other a little bit for the new folks here. And one of the reasons for wanting to do this as an in-person meeting rather than Zoom is because I think it just is going to make it easier for everybody to kind of connect a little bit. We'll then turn to committee organization. We need to do the organization of the committee this year, so that is elect a chair and a vice chair. We need to think a little bit about just kind of collect preferences for in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, a mix of those. That's the one thing on the agenda. I just want to drop that down as part of the review plan and schedule for the coming year. I think it will make sense to talk about that more after we talk through sort of the plan and the schedule for the year. So I've got some material to talk about on that. And then the other bit of business to follow up on is our letter to the regional school committee, which we were working on in the spring. So more on that when we get there. And then finally, we just have some minutes to approve from the prior meeting. So any changes to the agenda that anyone would like to propose? Then I would welcome a motion to accept the agenda as read. Thanks. Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
If you need somebody to co-host it, we can help.
Yeah, I should be okay, actually. Yeah, thanks.
Second motion.
Okay. And I think since Nora is online, we're going to do a roll call vote. So let's do that. So Paul.
Aye.
Ken.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And I'm as well. And are you sworn in?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
But
So
I probably should be, because I'm like, it should be a member.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're appointed. That's all good. To officially vote and participate, you have to stop by and see the clerk's office and get sworn in. It takes 2 minutes.
I learned that I was on this committee this morning, so
Yeah, I saw the timestamp.
didn't realize that I needed to go to work.
Yeah, I saw the timestamp. So just, in the next couple of days, just stop by. Takes 2 minutes. And then it all becomes official. Okay, so that is, oh yes, Nora, thank you, Nora.
Aye.
Thank you. The getting used to hybrid meetings, it's a little different than regular meetings. Yeah, Ken.
Question, or reminder for new members that they need to do the ethics training.
Yep.
And do existing members, how often do we need to renew that?
I think it's once every 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can verify that for you, but it's not, I don't think it's every year.
I believe you will get a reminder when you're due.
Okay.
This is kind of work, tell me to do that.
Yeah, you'll get instructions. You'll get instructions from them on ethics training. And when you're done, you get this nice little suitable for framing certificate. It's great.
You'll have to print it yourself because it's all in one. You will get it.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So then let's get to let's get to introductions. And since Penn brought up the ethics training reminder, one other suggestion for new members is to set up a dedicated email for advisory business. So I have, as you'll see, I have an advisory email, sickle.advisory@gmail.com. It can be just convenient to segregate things. And if ever there were an open meeting, if ever there were a request for official records of the committee, it's just a lot easier to pull whatever you need if it's all segregated. rather than mixed up with your other email. Not everybody does that. Some people, I did, a lot of people do. There's no requirement to do that, but just, since we're talking about things that new members might want to do, just something to consider.
Okay.
Okay, so on introductions. So I'll start. I'm Dan Sickle. I've been chair of advisory for the last couple of years. Live on Lake Street. Just we're neighbors, actually. I mean, there's a little blank space, but open space between us, but no. Yeah, I don't think there's another house.
Sorry, for my benefit, as people introduce themselves, it'd be helpful to hear when you joined the committee, just so I know.
Oh,
are you
sure.
brand new, or are you 2 years? Whatever.
Sure, yeah. So I joined the committee 3 years ago, so this is year 4 for me coming up. And as I said, I've been chair for the last 2. Husband and I moved to Sherborn 2012, so about a dozen years ago. I love living here and love being involved in town affairs. Why don't we just going around?
Sure. Mike Winters. This will be my 3rd year. I was vice chair last year. My wife and I moved to Sherborn 12 years ago, 2012. We live on Maple Street and have a almost 7-year-old. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Bonder. This is year 1 for me. I recently retired from work, so I was looking for something to do because I can't stay in the house. Because I was told that I got married for richer, for poorer, but not for lunch. So I can't stay. We moved to Sherborn in 2009. We live off of Western Ave on a private road called Wild Meadow Lane.
And I'm Penn Young. This is the beginning of my 2nd year in advisory. My wife and I moved to Sherborn in 1990 and lived until 2018 on Russell Road, and then we moved to Mason Road. And this was my first, I was on the traffic safety committee, but it actually never met. So this is kind of my first foray into town politics or town management, a formal town position. And it's been pretty great. Thumbs up to advisory.
So I'm Paul Pilot. This is my 2nd year in advisory, so I started this time last year. My wife and I moved to Sherborn about 4 years ago. We have twin daughters who just started as freshmen at the DS High School. I've enjoyed advisory as well.
Just me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Doug Kingsley, live on Farm Road, moved here in 05. I've got 4 now grown sons, raised them here, sent them all to private schools, so it wasn't in the public school system. And they are now all 3 of them were producing grandchildren at a steady pace. One of them you may bump into in town. He is a very tall police officer in town. Also Doug Kingsley.
My name is Shelley Sepper. This is my 2nd year on advisory. I'm on my 2nd tour of duty in Sherborn. Moved here in 2015, moved out in 2018 and back in 2020. So been here effectively 7 years. I have 4 children, and I have also served on the recycling committee. Did that for my first, for I think it was 2 years. So.
Or do you want to just say hi as well?
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Alstein. I am observing if the hope of joining the committee. I moved to Sherborn about 2 years ago. I live on Dobbing Brook Road. I've had a horse in Sherborn for about 16 years though, so I've been coming a lot. So yeah, this would be the first town committee that I would be involved in.
And I'm sorry, you moved to town when?
August of 2022. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Does everybody know Jeremy?
Yeah.
All right, I figured. Okay, just making sure. Okay, that's great. And
Do you want to
Oh, yeah, yes, of course, Nora, sorry, thank you, just keep reminding me. Nora, please, go ahead.
I'll keep reminding you I'm in California right now, so it's beautiful out here. Just got here this morning.
Go ahead, Nora, sorry.
No problem. Nora Lynch Smith. I moved to Sherborn from South Natick in 2000. I can't believe I'm saying that. Lived on Morse Road, and then about 2008, we moved to Woodland Street. I have had two kids going through the public and then also private school. And actually, they're both out here in sunny California, so that's why I'm here. And just visiting. And let's see what else. I own Landmark Residential and Sherborn Gallery and Gifts right in town at 5 Washington Street. And it's always an honor to be here. And then Doug, I'm going into my third year, and I have served also as the advisory member for capital budget. Last year was my first year. The year before that, I was an alternate member. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nora. And hope California really is sunny. Good, glad to hear that. Okay, so next order of business is committee organization and electing chair and vice chair. So let's start with chair. So
Can I
nomination.
ask a question?
For
Chair,
chair,
how
okay.
many members are on the committee right now? 7?
There are 7.
So the bylaw said there's supposed to be 9. Is that a goal or is that just?
So you're number 8,
I'm number
and
8.
as soon as you're sworn
I see.
in, then you become number 8. And I think Mike Giano has number 9 in mind.
Got it. But the goal is to have 9.
That's right. The 9 is, and
Moderator with the full 9.
Yeah. And there have always, at least in my memory in recent history, there have always been 9 members on the committee. All right, so nominations for chair are open. Mike.
I'd like to nominate Dan Sickle to give it a try.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to second that.
Other nominations? All right, roll call vote. So I don't forget, Nora, let's start with you.
Yes, I vote yes for Dan. Aye.
I as well vote yes for me.
Okay,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Mike?
Is this an annual?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate the vote of confidence. And look forward to, I think it'll be another good year with the committee. So let's open nominations for vice chair. And I'm going to jump in and nominate Mike Winters as vice chair to continue for another year.
I second the motion.
Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, Shelley, let's start with you.
Aye. Support.
I'm I as well in support. Steve?
Aye.
Nora?
Aye.
Mike, if you want to vote.
Aye.
Okay, great. And that reminds me one thing I need to get.
Thank you.
We're out here. Give me just 1 second.
Being in Chicago, everything's unanimous.
Okay. Okay, I need notes because I'm going to take minutes tonight, but we'll talk more about minutes taking in a little bit. Okay, so all of that on chair and vice chair, again, thanks for the vote of confidence. Look forward to doing this in the coming year. I'm going to switch screen share and pop up a document that I just put together this afternoon that just has some kind of notes on the schedule for the coming year. Just as a reminder, since we're getting started, for those of us who've done this before, and as info for new folks. So give me just a second to switch documents.
Share should come up on that screen.
Perfect, perfect.
Is the meeting schedule set for the year and is it published?
It is not set yet, and I'm going to talk about that. And I need to make this a little bit smaller. So rough schedule here of what we're gonna be doing. From really now through early November, our orders of business are to draft a budget guidance letter for department heads. And there are two key ingredients of that. One is providing some budget guidance, which would amount to a target amount for change in department budgets outside of wages and salaries. And just as way of context, for as many years as I've been involved in paying attention, that's been zero, with no nominal change in budgets, on the expectation that department heads would find savings if there are new things they need to do. And if they want to deviate from that guidance, then they need to come to the committee and provide an explanation for why they're deviating from our guidance. So that's ingredient one. Ingredient two is the so-called, I don't really like this term, but the so-called COLA, or cost of living adjustment. Really, it's just setting what the number would be for the salary change for non-union employees. So police, DPW, and school employees are all unionized. So those salary changes are all specified in union contracts. But for the employees, and it's not actually that many, but who are not unionized, we make a recommendation to town meeting on what the salary change should be for that group of employees. And we'll get a recommendation from the personnel board. They will do some analysis and come to us with a recommendation, which we can either adopt or not. And in recent years, I pulled together some data on from federal government statistics on what had been increases in state and local government employees around the country in the Northeast, some numbers on inflation, just as kind of background and context for that. But those are the two things that we will need to settle on, those specific numbers, and then they get crafted into a letter that goes, a guidance letter that goes to all the department heads. And we need to approve the text for that letter too. But the real substance of it, and the thing that everybody will be looking for, are those two numbers. What's the budget guidance and what's the recommended COLA? My guess is we'll need 2 or 3 meetings to sort that out, which, and that really, we need that guidance letter to go out by early November. So between now and then, probably 2 or 3 meetings. I think the next meeting, likely either October 16th or 23rd. I have a complicated schedule thing going on, so I need a couple more days before I know which of those days I'm going to be in town. I'll definitely be in town one of them, but a little bit of a complicated thing. Last year, there was a special town meeting in the fall, and that made, as we'll all fondly remember, that made our fall schedule much busier with many more meetings. As far as I know, the select board is not contemplating a special town meeting in the fall, and that means we'll, as I said, meet probably it'll end up being 3 more times between now and the end of the year to do the budget guidance and that letter. Then January.
Sorry, our meeting's always gonna be on a Wednesday.
Traditionally, we've always done them on Wednesdays at 7, and unless there's a strong sentiment to do something different, that's what I propose we do. But we can talk about that if people want to do something different. It's part of the reason for that is the select board meets on Thursdays, so we don't really want to meet on Thursdays. Other committees meet on other days, and so I think it sort of over the years settled down that Wednesday was kind of a natural day. But if that is a problem, there's nothing sacrosanct about Wednesday. It could shift.
There are a lot of meetings during the year where multiple committees have to meet at the same time.
We occasionally would meet simultaneously with the capital budget committee or with the select board. If it's with the select board, we would typically go to their meeting, which would be on Thursday. There are some joint meetings during the year, public hearing, and so on. That's just by design a joint meeting. But mostly it would be us on Wednesday nights. And 7 o'clock time slots has worked pretty well for people in the past.
And do you tend to have the meetings in person or
We're
hybrid?
going to talk about that. That's on the list. We'll come to that. Let me just spin through sort of the rest of the year and the schedule and timetable. January through March is really the busy season for the committee. We'd be meeting somewhere between weekly or bi-weekly. And these would be the meetings when we get together to review and discuss operating budgets for each department and review and discuss all capital requests, and review and discuss all non-budget warrant articles. Last year, I tried setting a schedule with meeting every other week, and I think it turned out that just wasn't quite enough time for the depth of discussion that everybody wanted to get into. So we started out every other week and then pivoted to every week. I think I will propose a schedule that'll probably be most weeks with a few skipped and see if that works. In late March, we have an all-day Saturday public hearing. Meeting typically starts around 8:30, ends around 5. And that's, again, an opportunity when all budget, the whole budget and all warrant articles are reviewed, and it's called a public hearing because it is designed to solicit feedback from the public. And it's really, I mean, these meetings are open. Anybody can come to any of our meetings. They're all, posted in the usual way, but that meeting is specifically designed to solicit public comment and input. And that is the meeting at which we, as advisory members, all vote on the budget, if necessary, on specific items in the budget, on all the capital requests, and on all the non-budget warrant articles. So that's the point when we all go on the record and formally vote to make recommendations to town meeting. All of our prior discussions in January through March, we're talking about things. It'll probably become clear from the conversation, sort of who's where on different issues. But we don't actually vote at any of those meetings. That's just discussion and review. The voting all happens at that all-day public hearing.
Lisa, do you expect that to be Zoom, live, or to be determined?
To be determined. We've done it on Zoom in recent years. Obviously pre-COVID, it was always live. It may be the format like this, would be, but as I said, I wanted to move the discussion of Zoom in person to the end of this discussion about sort of schedule and plans, so that everybody sort of has a full view of here's what's coming. And then we should talk about, whether we want to do mostly Zoom, mostly in person, mix of the two, and what do we want to do for the public hearing. The public hearing, I will propose a date for that when I lay out a calendar for the committee. We don't have to decide whether that's Zoom or in person until we get a little bit closer. We have to decide far enough ahead to reserve a room and do all the other arrangements if we want to go that route. And in time to send out the notices to, the notice to everybody in town. Here's the public hearing. Here's where it's going to be. And then town meeting. So we'll at that public hearing vote on everything. Those votes will become the core input into the advisory report, right, that gets sent out to every household in the town. If there are, minority positions, dissenting votes, that all gets written up in there. Everything gets included in that. Everything gets included in that report. That will be a bit of work in the time period between the public hearing and town meetings. We have to, as a committee, draft that report and get that put together. And then town meeting the date's been set for Tuesday, April 29th, with the spillover date on Thursday, May 1st, if a spillover date is needed. It hasn't been needed in recent years and hopefully won't. So I will, in the next week or two, put together a proposed schedule for the year. And then at our next meeting, we can talk about that, and we can in a minute talk about preferences people have. If there's a strong preference, not to do Wednesday night or something. But I'll propose a schedule which we can then talk about and kind of, finalize as a plan for the year. Okay, let's do a couple other things and then we'll come to this issue of Zoom versus in person. So particularly for new members, a reminder for others, we will have liaisons to each department. So we typically assign one or sometimes two for larger departments liaisons. And the idea is for this person to become a bit of an expert on that budget, on that department's budget, and to kind of serve as a conduit between that department and advisory, so that when a department comes and presents their budget to us, maybe they've had a chance to talk it through with a member of advisory first and, get some feedback on, hey, given the composition of the committee, here's, how I think committee might react to this, or, or if there's something unusual happening within a department's budget that they're likely to propose, to, provide a heads up for the full committee that, hey, the fire department's contemplating this thing, and just, might be helpful for everybody to be thinking about that a little bit before they actually come and present to us. So I will propose a list. I'll propose a set of assignments for liaisons. So on that, and if I propose something, you think, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that, this can all be adjusted. But I would say if you have particular preference for department that you especially feel like, you'd like to be that kind of point of connection to, let me know. Or alternatively, if there's something you absolutely don't want to do, let me know that as well. And again, I will be a little slower about that than the timetable of meetings, because really the liaison work will start a little bit later, and we can talk more about that when that time gets closer. Also, Nora mentioned this for the capital budget committee. I'll designate a voting member, and then we also have an alternate. And the alternate often is somebody who in the future might be a voting member on capital budget, and it's sort of a chance to be a backup and get a glimpse into how capital budget committee works. Let me stop. Questions, comments so far?
Given I'm new, forgive me if this sounds like a dumb question, but what's the difference between departments like fire department and, or, school or whatever, and the boards like Board of Health or whatever? I mean, when you say we want to liaison to departments, what are we talking about?
So we're really talking about every budget maker. So that would include both department heads like fire department, would also include Board of Health, because the Board of Health is going to come to us with a proposed budget.
So kind of all the entities in town that in any way spend money.
Yes, yes. So anyone who has an operating budget or a capital budget will have a liaison to that. Yeah. What else? Okay. And then, as I said, then on minutes, this is everybody's favorite part. I'll write up minutes for tonight. But what I'm hoping everybody will be agreeable to is to just have a rotation where we just have everybody take turns to taking minutes during the meeting. And then when you do that, if you ship it to me, I'll just have a second set of eyes on the minutes. Then we'll bring them back to a meeting for approval. And once they've been approved, then, they go to the town clerk for posting.
So at that point, there is not a board secretary.
So we have not done that. We could have a clerk who did that. I think most people find minutes not to be the most fun task in the world. And so the recent tradition has been to just share that around and just have a rotation. And obviously, if, it turns out your name, Doug, if your name came up and it was, this is going to be a crazy week for me, I just don't want to deal with it. Just do a trade. It's no big deal.
No.
But it just shares that burden around, rather than if somebody wants to volunteer to do that full time, that would be, probably everybody else would say thank you, but I think, there's some merit in just sharing that around.
It would be a beautiful gesture of enthusiasm by one of the new members.
Yeah. Nice try, Penny. Nice try.
Well, on that topic, having not been to the last meeting, I just read the minutes. I think these are about the right amount of detail of minutes. So
And that's,
for those of you, I've been on many, many boards. For those of you who are not ready or not, experienced writing minutes, you don't need to write down everything everybody says. Basically, topics discussed and motions taken, I think is, so I think it's a good example.
And we have somebody that does them for the long meetings. Right?
yes, for the public
For the
hearing,
public hearing all day meeting, they
Sure.
have someone that does that.
right, right.
So they're
Although-
responsible, right?
Yes, although that person was just elected to the planning board, so I'll have to check with her and see if she's still interested in doing that. We might need to find somebody new. We'll see about that. Jeremy, it just occurred to me, I'm just trying to check and make sure this is getting recorded.
I saw it.
I thought I
Yes,
saw
it
that
is.
it was.
I see it's being recorded.
Perfect.
It
It wasn't
is.
showing up on my screen. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure we've got that set. Okay. So it sounds like everybody's agreeable to just doing a rotation on minutes. Okay. So that is it for that. I've got one other thing. Do this in another. One second. All right, I left that other document elsewhere. Give me a second. Let me stop the share here. Okay. All right, my puzzlement, I thought I had one other thing with me, but I think I can do it from memory. All right, so actually, why don't we talk about the Zoom in person thing? Let's do that. So thoughts, here's my, I don't have my laptop, this is what I want. Thoughts, Zoom in person, Ken?
I always prefer in person, so I would vote for that with the thought that if we have an especially snowy winter, then maybe those, the dead of winter months would slide over to Zoom.
I have my hand raised. May I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I prefer hybrid. So obviously I would be there with bells on if I were in town. I think also weather permitting, and I also like the idea for record keeping purposes to have these recorded for the public. So either way, I prefer hybrid, which means both.
And Nora, you prefer hybrid to just doing pure Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, okay. And just to clarify, I'm not using words carefully. When I say in person, I really mean hybrid, because if we do an in-person meeting, we would do it here. Or if we couldn't get this room, we'd try to get, say, the room in the library that has a similar setup. So in-person would be hybrid, because I'm completely on board with Nora that meetings should be recorded. Those recordings should get posted in due order. And doing a hybrid meeting is an easy way to have, our in-person meeting recorded. All right, Doug, you.
Yeah, no, I have really strong opinions on this, and I'm gonna agree with more. I think we need hybrid. I've participated in a number of committee meetings as just a resident over the last several months, and I'm kind of horrified that a lot of committee meetings only meet on Zoom. They don't ever meet in person, and they have no intention of meeting in person. I think it's frankly something this advisory committee should look into. I think in person, we're in the same room. It makes a big difference. And because the technology is fantastic, I mean, we're hearing everything Nora's saying, this is recorded. Hybrid is terrific. One of the arguments I've heard against doing hybrid is, people don't have the right Wi-Fi or whatever. Then show up at the town hall. Everybody lives less than 3 miles from this building. So show up here or get on Zoom. Have both as options. The technology works. We've had this for 4 years. We cannot have, unless there's like literally blizzard, we can't have just a Zoom meeting. That would be strong against it. Flip side is I need hybrid because I know for a fact that I will be out of town for some of the meetings. So I want to be able to get on.
Yeah, so in person, we always have the option. It's actually a really nice thing that the town made the investment in getting the equipment
It's fantastic.
to do this. I've been on a lot of, in a lot of hybrid meetings and, this is, I don't know, I'd probably give it like a BB plus. It's not perfect. But it's pretty darn good and it works.
Seems to work, yeah.
It works. It is, I will say from the perspective of managing the meeting, kind of guiding an in-person and Zoom meeting has its additional challenges. You see, I keep missing or messing up with other things, but I'll get better. I'll get better at that.
But honestly, that's not a lot different than someone in the back of our room waving their hand. And hybrid works. We can all make it work.
Any other thoughts?
Dan, if I could, I'd like to also, may I speak for a moment? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because you can't see me, I'm sorry. I'd also like to propose or set a precedent that if we are like having to do it hybrid, for example, me, that we really make an attempt to be live in person rather than just with a blank screen. I think that's a good precedent to start with other boards too, that we should see people's faces if they're part of the committee.
And, no, it's great. It's great that you're on screen and visible. It makes it feel much more like you're here rather than disembodied voice. So that's great. Stephen, go ahead.
This may sound a bit strident, but I do agree with the hybrid. But if people, I think the default should be in person. If you're traveling, not feeling well, there's other circumstances, then to be on the Zoom call, but the default should be in person. in my opinion.
Others?
I actually agree with Steve. I was going to say the same. I like the notion of hybrid that Norman mentioned, but to try to be here in person, I think it is better to be able to see it.
Totally agree.
If you can.
Yeah. Pat?
I just wanted to clarify that when I spoke about in person, I was using your definition of in person as hybrid.
You were as sloppy with language as I was.
Yes.
Shelley, Mike, thoughts?
I'm fine with the hybrid. I should be able to make most of them. I don't travel, because I don't travel outside of the home, but my husband travels all the time, so sometimes there are times I need
Yeah.
to do it on Zoom, but I will make every effort to be here. I feel like it's also more, it feels like you're more engaged when you're actually physically in the space versus looking at the little squares. It's
100%.
especially with some of this information we go through, which is very, there's a lot of minutia and detail.
Yeah.
I just get a little bit more out.
Yeah, Mike, thoughts?
Yeah, nothing really to.
Okay.
It's different.
Okay. Yeah, good by me. And I think once we have a calendar set, we should be able to get kind of this space or another space reserved and, be able to do this. And, again, I'm sure there'll be times, probably will happen to me too. I'll try to not let it happen, but, I'll be sick or there'll be some issue that, I have to be on Zoom or be traveling. But, yeah, I think the idea of all trying to be here as much as possible would be good.
Since you mentioned the next one might be the 16th or 23rd, I will put in a plug for the 23rd, because the 16th, I'm going to be in Europe. And it will be very late for me.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if that makes a difference.
All right. Just making it for 1023. Okay. I don't have very much control over the thing. I've got to wait for something to sort out. So it'll be whatever, however that goes. Okay. All right. So that's good. So we'll plan on that. That'll be a change from last year, but we're, COVID is getting further, the pandemic's getting further behind us, so it seems like a good time to step forward that way. So last thing, along the just kind of how we do meetings, since we'll be doing this in person. When we were doing things on Zoom, our custom pretty much was people would speak when recognized by the chair. I want to suggest, even if we're doing things in person, particularly with the Zoom contingent, that we continue to do that. I think that worked pretty well. Made sure everybody had a chance to speak. kept the conversation kind of, flowing in a balanced way. And at least by my observation, last year, we had, good conversations back and forth when people either agreed or disagreed about an issue. And just really wanted to just kind of check in with everybody and make sure everybody was okay with kind of proceeding that way this year. Yeah,
Does the chair recognize you?
I do.
So in the last 20 minutes, I've probably interrupted you several times to ask questions. Is that something that you don't want us to do since we're all at the same table, or do you want me to raise my hand, or what's the protocol?
I would say probably best to just raise hand. I mean, if it's a really small thing, it's going to be obvious you want to speak and I'm going to see you.
Yeah.
And that's actually an advantage of being in person.
That's my point.
And the body language is going to be really obvious. Oh, Doug has something he wants to say. It's going to be really obvious, which I think is, different than the raising hand function on Zoom. But I think I think we'll just have a smoother functioning meetings if pretty much it's, get recognized and then speak. Particularly if we do end up in a situation where people are disagreeing on something, I think that'll be a good way to kind of guide that conversation. Not that we'll disagree on anything this year, but just in case. Okay, yeah, Ken.
Does that mean you're gonna start saying the chair recognizes?
If you want me to, I could. I wasn't really planning on that, but I've been in committees that did really formal Robert's rules kind of stuff. And so, I can go there if you want.
Your style is working for us, Dan.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Ken. So anything else before we get to the school committee thing, anything else on just schedules, plan for the year, conduct of meetings?
So the goal is to have a schedule of meeting dates by when?
I expect I will be able to do that with it, to have a proposal. And we can all have a look at it and make sure it works as best as possible for as many of us as possible. And I will also propose a set of, which departments and budget makers come to us when in January, February, and March. There will undoubtedly be some shifts where somebody's schedule will make it impossible for them to be there on a particular day, or there'll be some issue that comes up that really makes it more sensible for them to talk about budget after something particular happens. But I should be able to do that within about a week. I think my schedule issue will sort out probably by the weekend. Anything else on that? Okay, so let me do a screen share on the school committee letter. And let me provide a little bit of background and update. Okay. Hopefully everybody in Zoom land can see that. Nora, is this coming through as a screen share?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so a little bit of background. The schools had a capital project to replace rooftop unit air handlers on the high school. That project was approved in fiscal 24 for 1.2 million. And then it was delayed for a year because of supply chain issues and some other things. And when they finally got ready to do the work, the cost of the project escalated to about 2 million. And the school committee, this is the regional school committee, filled in that gap by transferring about 350,000 from a capital account that they had. And there was money in that account because there had been a project that they had used excess and deficiency, their version of free cash for, to replace boilers, which then after the money had been approved, turns out the boilers still had another 10 years to live. So they didn't need to spend the money on that. The money remained in the capital account. And so they transferred that 350,000 toward this rooftop unit project. And they used about $500,000 in free cash. Excess and deficiency is their fancy term for free cash to cover the balance. That, I think, would be fair to say, caused as information about that got to those of us in Sherborn, I think it'd be fair to say it caused a little bit of a kerfuffle. I don't think I think it's clear the school committee didn't do anything that, that wasn't consistent with, their regulations and their authorities. So it's not that they did something that was outside of their authority, but that episode highlighted some ways in which budgeting of the regional schools is happening that isn't maybe as transparent as what we in Sherborn would like. And so a letter got drafted last spring, and this being the latest version of that letter, to go to the school committee that would propose 3 things that we'd like them to agree to do with budgeting going forward. So this is the text here has been kind of coordinated and negotiated primarily between me and Peter Moores. Everyone on advisory, not the new members, everybody else, saw an earlier draft that wasn't so different from this. Peter Moores and I made a few changes over the summer, and then he's chair of the Capital Budget Committee, and then I spent a good bit of time this summer with the chair of the Dover Warrant Committee, the vice chair of the Dover Warrant Committee, and the chair of the Dover Capital Budget Committee. And they've indicated an interest in being signatories on the letter. So, the hope is that the letter comes from Sherborn Advisory, Sherborn Capital Budget, Dover Warrant, and Dover Capital Budget, and then would go to the school committee. The essence of the letter, the 3 points, and they're not really all that dramatic points. It's just looking for kind of laying down some ground rules for how they would handle their budgeting and interacting with the town. Point 1 on the capital plan would be that every capital project be on their capital plan and remain on the capital plan until it's completed, however it's financed. There have been projects in the past that have been on the capital committee, that have been on the capital plan, and then they have decided to finance those with E&D, their version of free cash, and then they sort of faded from the capital plan, which just makes it much harder for us to keep track of what are all the projects that they're doing and what's the kind of total amount of capital spending that they are doing and proposing to do. So capital plan, the idea being if there's a project, doesn't matter how it's financed, it's on the capital plan. The capital plan indicates either how it was financed or how they propose to finance it if it's a future project, and it remain on that plan until it's completed. Just a bit more transparency and make it easier for us and for Dover to keep track of those costs. The second item was communication with the towns, and just wanting the school committee to communicate to the towns about any cost overruns or changes in a status of the capital project in complete detail as soon as possible. There are some differing views on this depending on whether you talk to people, say on Sherborn Advisory or involved with the schools. But I think it felt to a number of us here that we heard about the specifics of just how big the cost overrun was going to be on these rooftop units with a bit of a lag, and it would have been helpful to have known about that just as soon as possible. So to get a commitment from the regional school committee that if there's any change in the cost of a capital project or the status, that get reported to the towns, both Sherborn and Dover, as soon as possible. And then finally, and this is probably the most substantive one, labeled as governance for use of excess and deficiency, or E&D, which is that when they have any capital project, that capital project comes to the towns for approval at town meeting, regardless of how it's financed, whether it's financed, whether it's to be financed with borrowing, with an intermunicipal agreement, whether it's to be financed with free cash, whether it's to be financed with excess and deficiency, using their free cash account, whether it's been financed from their capital account, that all of those capital items are considered part of the budget. And as part of the budget, they should be presented to the towns, and there should be a vote at town meeting on that. And Peter Moores and I chair a capital budget. He's a lawyer, I'm not, but he and I read all the relevant regs many times very carefully. And it's our view that what I just said is consistent with the regs, and that any capital item needs to come to the towns. In the past, if they have financed a capital item with E&D, they have not brought it to the towns for approval. And they would just say, yeah, we took care of it, we're self-financing, we don't need the towns to approve this. So this is, I think, the most substantive change, that if they're proposing a capital item, it needs to come to the towns. Now, the way that they have used E&D is if there's a modest project that they, either an emergency or something they really want to get going on quickly, they want to just use E&D. If it's January, just use E&D and get it started rather than waiting until town meeting to get approval. And the school committee absolutely has authority to do that. But under our interpretation of the regs, that would represent a change in their budget, and they would need to formally notify the towns that they're doing that and intending to do that. And the towns would then have a 45-day window to say, no, you can't do that. Of course, for the town to do that, that would require a town meeting vote, that would require a special town meeting, except I think in extraordinary circumstances, they aren't going to get a no in that 45-day period. But it would set in place, if they agree to this, it would set in place formal notification that, we have a $40,000 project, there was an emergency, something broke in the school, we really need to replace it. We're going to spend $40,000 E&D in this. Here's notification to Dover and Sherborn that we're doing this. So that's really what's in the letter. It's really just about transparency and communication, and just trying to avoid the sort of issue that came up in the spring. Wait, what? When did this happen? What happened? And trying to just avoid that. So that's the gist of the letter. I hope that members had a chance to read it. My hope is that we can approve the text, that the committee is good with this text. And if so, then if we get to that point, then we can coordinate with these other groups who are going to be signatories and get a formal version put together to send. Doug.
So before we get into the text of the letter, I just have some factual questions I want to get on the table. Does this committee, does anyone understand actually why there was an order of magnitude $1 billion overrun of this project? Because I asked the selectmen at their last meeting and nobody had a clue.
I can tell you what the business administrator at schools said, which is one, the initial bids they got they were estimates rather than firm bids. This is has been a time when, supply chains are strained. It's hard to get this equipment. That's why they couldn't do it. And that's why, it got delayed a year, because you order the equipment. It's going to take, 10 months until the equipment arrives. So there were those sorts of delays. And by the time they finally got there and got formal bids, the cost was just much higher. Labor costs rising rapidly. So, you wait 18 months. It's going to cost more to do. So that would be one thing they would say. Another thing they would say is, after the project was proposed, the initial design included in the air handlers a natural gas component for heat as needed for these air handlers. And sustainability committees in Sherborn and in Dover, and I think high school students at DS, went back to the school committee and said, hey, we'd really like an all-electric, more green version of this. And there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about that, but at least not that I heard, but the school committee decided to do that. And so they switched the specs of the contract to an all-electric version of the air handling units. And it turned out that by doing that, it wasn't just a matter of substituting like for like, where you take out one piece of equipment and plug in the replacement, but it required changing some of the surrounding infrastructure. And then that triggered a requirement that everything be brought up to code, because if you just change like for like, didn't need everything else to be brought up to code. And so that added some additional expenses. So that I think is what, that has been, Jeremy, if you remember anything different than that, please chime in, but that's
a good summary.
that was the explanation that their business administrator provided to us.
So that's helpful. It's a lot more detailed than Board of Selectmen had at that last meeting. We're not gonna get the answers to this probably, but in terms of transparency, it would be helpful to understand of the total 100% overrun, whatever it was, how much of it was switching the spec? Was that 90% of it? Was that 10% of it? How much of it was supply chain? I'm not impugning anybody, but there's a lot of arm waving going on here about, well, it's supply chain this, whatever that, whatever. It's more sustainable. Okay, well, maybe that was a stupid decision. So anyway, this is back to the macro question of, can the school committee operate truly kind of independently and spend this money? And this is what this letter's all about. I think it's a great letter. I have a couple of 30,000-foot questions and then a couple of detailed questions. The 30,000-foot question is, why do we want to have this signed by multiple committees from both towns as opposed to just us?
Oh, yeah. So, right, the regional schools are an interesting political entity in Massachusetts, right? Because they are their own political entity with statutory authority to do a whole lot of stuff. It's almost as if they're a separate municipality. So they, have that independent authority, again, almost as if they're an independent municipality. But who pays the bills? Well, it's the towns of Dover and Sherborn, because we're sharing the middle school and the high school. So there have been times in the past when Sherborn has been unhappy with something in the budget, but Dover was fine with it. And then, we get a response from the school committee, well, Dover's fine with this, we're fine with it, little old Sherborn, whatever. So the logic of getting everybody involved is if both towns say, this is how we'd like you to do the budgeting, both the advisory and warrant committee, warrant, right, being their version of advisory, and both capital budget committees, I think it sends a much stronger signal to the schools that, hey, we're paying the bills and we want you to do it this way. So I think the odds of the letter achieving its goals are much greater if it comes from both towns.
That's really helpful, and I appreciate that explanation of logic. I would caution to say, just as you gave an example a second ago, Dover was okay with something, we weren't. Because we're presenting this as a united front, we're going to get one answer back. Whatever that answer is, might satisfy the committees in Dover, it might not satisfy us. So that is a risk you run.
So if that happens, we'll deal with that. But we're in any case only going to get one answer back. Doesn't matter what we do, because they're not going to handle budgeting differently for us than they do for Dover. They're going to do their budget. They present the same budget to us, the same budget to Dover. And there's no chance that they're going to do, well, here's the special way that, we handle the Sherborn budget and we do something different for the Dover budget. Ken?
Thanks, Ed. So to touch on a couple of those things, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I've observed this, part of this process, there is some very clear autonomy on the part of the school committee, and there is a wider sphere that would be a gray area of assumed or claimed autonomy. And I think some of that needs to be worked out. There's been, one of the things that's been historically true is, as Dan has put it, the attitude in Dover has often been whatever the schools want. The attitude in Sherman has generally been whatever the schools need. So that contributes to the gray area because there's sort of different views. So actually, it's a very big deal that both towns are signing on to this, because, I won't say there's been a policy of divide and conquer on the part of the school committee, but it's effectively worked somewhat that way. The other thing is, on the details of it, I remember watching the recording of the school committee meeting where they brought all this, where they made this decision. And they didn't give, they did not give a breakdown, but the impression I got was that a great deal of the overrun was due to the change in spec.
All that was.
Because they did go into a lot of detail, like, all right, now we're changing, we have to change the physical infrastructure these things are connecting to, electrical and go up to code. So I don't have a percentage, but their indication was it was low range.
else? Anybody for, anybody else? Yeah, Stephen?
Moving on the detail, the 3 paragraphs. In the first bullet, we talk about a 6-year capital plan. I appreciate that 6 years might be the recommended time frame, but it seems kind of short. Should we begin to talk about a longer time frame for a capital plan?
So, yeah, so Jeremy, well, I think you have something to say on this. So, I mean, this standard that the town is doing now was a 6-year capital plan. And actually, I was just yesterday, or the day before yesterday, at a seminar run by the Massachusetts Municipal Association on capital budgeting. And it happened to be moderated by this amazing town administrator named Jeremy Marcel. And the way that question came up and the way they put it was, 6 years, people probably have pretty good visibility, but that you absolutely want to be thinking beyond that. But that the thinking beyond that, the visibility is less. So it might be more, here are some big projects that are coming in that longer time frame that everybody should be thinking about and knowing about, because there'll be some very large capital expenses. So, here in Sherborn, maybe that would be something to do with Pine Hill School, something dramatic with Pine Hill School. That would be out there, but would be hard to be super specific about the exact timing and the exact amount.
Well, it seems like various enterprises can look at the big items in buildings like roofing, pointing, HVAC systems, and understand what the lives are on these things. They're pretty predictable, I think.
And the town's actually, and again, Jeremy knew more about this, but maybe 4 years ago, had a consulting firm called Onsite Insight, who did exactly that and looked at all the buildings and capital assets in town and did what's the remaining service life and what's the expected, as best they could tell, what's the expected kind of maintenance upkeep costs going forward. So that's out there, and we've done that. And I think that has guided, has importantly guided thinking on capital projects.
I'm just throwing, maybe it's a recommendation to consider that campus is fairly finite, that maybe they should think about undertake a project like that to prepare the 2 communities for what's in store. The other comment that I have is in the communications, it's any cost overrun, and I'm not second guessing anybody. Maybe an independent agency like that needs some flexibility. Maybe it's a percentage as opposed to an absolute greater than 0.
Oh, on the communication thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose if it goes over by $100, you want to know about it, it'd be in violation of the agreement, and going to give them some flexibility.
Yeah.
I think the first iteration had like kind of a number. Did we talk about that? Like there was a threshold. Exceeded a certain threshold, wasn't $1 million, but it was,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
remember.
the tough part is the rationale is that the upper limit is what is approved. And if they go over that upper limit, that's the overrun. So it's like over budget whether it's $1 or 10,000.
I think, Stephen, I think the way the regs go, Jeremy says, they present a capital budget to the town approves it. And then if they want to spend more, even if they're gonna pull it from E&D, I mean, you're right, if it's $100, nobody's gonna care.
So theoretically, there's a contingency, I'm sorry, to interrupt. There's a
No.
contingency built into it already. So,
They should, right, so that upper limit that
Right,
they
okay,
approve
that-
has a contingency.
I mean-
So it accounts for some of that.
On large projects the town does, right, there's typically, here's the estimate of what's gonna cost, and then there's a 10%-ish depending on the contingency that gets built in. And I think the logic, I take the point again, that if it's $100, probably nobody's gonna care, but the logic is, if you wanna spend more than the budget, you have to tell the town what you're gonna do. Even if, I mean, if they're gonna say, the final bid came in $300 over budget, and they send an email to Jeremy and his counterpart in Dover, and, chair of select boards, that's not a huge burden. Oh,
On that same paragraph, I like the, until as soon as possible. But it could be stronger by adding to that and before the regional schools, a school committee votes on approving funding. Because one thing is as soon as possible, but I think it might be good to emphasize that. We want to know about it before the school committee votes on approving funding. It's kind of, if they communicate to us as soon as possible, it should be before they vote, but it might be stronger for us if we add that.
yeah,
Can I ask Bill on that? Just actually, my impression was, I don't have the dates right, but basically we had an April town meeting here. These guys, this school committee met like less than 2 weeks later
May 7th.
and then said, oh yeah, we're gonna spend another $1 million, whatever. That to me is what stinks that I have in terms of transparency, governance, them making their own decisions, whatever. So to your point, I think there's no way they didn't know before our town meeting that they were gonna show up with another $1 million. So I think the whole concept of this letter is fantastic, which is basically saying we need better transparency, communication, governance, decision-making. And, you're in the minutia of like exactly what we're asking them for. I think the rubber's gonna hit the road on E&D. I don't know a single person on this committee, I'm not impugning anyone on this committee, but my impression is this committee, the school committee thinks that this is their money to spend however they want. And we're essentially what we're saying is, no, it's not really. Because the way I read the regs that you're quoting in here, they didn't actually follow the regs, correct? Technically, that's our reading of it.
In the following sense, that, by my reading of the regs, all capital items should be part of the budget needs to go to the town for approval.
Right.
And
It didn't happen.
that's not, and, it didn't happen, and nobody in either of the towns, raised an issue about it. It was just, that was sort of how things evolved, and, how budgeting got done, and everybody seemed okay with it. And now we're actually saying, hey, let's do it this other way. I want to slip in one other thing. And now you guys will all get mad at me, but just, sort of a reality of the letter. So this took a huge part of the summer to negotiate the language. If we change much, actually, I think if we change anything, then I've got to go back to capital budget. I've got to go back to Dover. And then instead of the letter going out this month, or early October, the letter will end up going out in December.
It's the downside of doing a joint letter, but I have 2 suggestions. I don't want to take the floor again without your.
Yeah, just hang on, just 1 second. So, I should have said that at the outset, but that I think is so, I think if there's really concern about the thrust of the letter, then absolutely, we're not ready. I think I would put in a plea that if people are pretty much okay with the letter and the changes are small and around the edges, unless they seem really essential, maybe let it go so we can actually get this out. Because I think that, if I have to go back to Dover, I sent this text to them. If I have to go back to them, it'll be December and the issue's kind of gonna fade and be forgotten. Let me just get to Nora and then
Please.
back to you. Nora.
Thank you. I actually had my hand raised before Doug, and I was going to actually bring up something that Doug mentioned. Is that maybe, again, not necessarily changing the letter, but, and maybe it is moot because Dover is part of this, but instead of saying as soon as possible, say before town meeting or something like, but I'm fine with the letter as is, but if that's part of the deal is as soon, what's one person as soon as possible versus before town meeting. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the timing, as Nora, as you said, Doug, as you said, the timing was really awkward. It was really, really awkward that, 2 weeks after town meeting, we learned that there was gonna be an $800,000 cost of it. It was really, really awkward. Okay.
Two things. First of all, in a perfect universe, I would second Paul's original suggestion, but we don't live in one, so I'm with Paul and letting that go. But I do want to go back to the sort of the fact that we don't have to Stephen's point or question about we don't have a amount or percentage of overrun. And I think that I'm very much in favor of the letter as written on that score, because the point is they set a budget. They're supposed to stick to it. If they set a budget, we all approve it, it gets voted, and they should be required to stick to that.
Yeah,
If they're like any other budget matter, I would expect a contingency to have been built in either as a line item or just because that's how you do it.
I totally understand the idea of we're doing this with other committees and it's gonna take time. One of the concerns I have, I'm new to this committee, is that this letter hasn't gone out yet, right? When we should get this out, I get it. I would say two things, starting at the end, I do think we have to at least ask for a response by a date certain. I looked at the website, both committees are scheduled to meet, I got the dates, whatever. I mean, I think we should say, we'd like a response by X date, December 1 or whatever, based on when they'll be able to meet.
So that seems fine. I think the challenge is how quickly does Dover, get to approve this? And then it would seem like
Yeah,
At
just
the end-
assuming when it goes out.
at the end, we
But-
could, pick a date, 6 weeks out or
So I think we look
something.
at their schedule, meaning the school committee schedule, because they'll obviously they meet separate, but then they meet together. Figure out what those dates are.
It's just the regional school committee.
Well, right, the regional school committee meets on October 8th, November 15th, December 3rd.
Right.
The point is they're gonna have multiple meetings.
Yep.
I kind of feel like if they've had 2 meetings to talk about this, they should give us an answer. So depending on when this goes out, I think we've got to put a date at the end, like we expect to hear back after your December 3rd meeting or something. That's my first point. The second point is, it's a great letter, and we're doing the right thing here. I'm not in any way critiquing the letter, but essentially, at the end of the first paragraph here, you say, that said, we all agree that RSC's actions were in line with what has been usual practice in recent years. The but and the point of this letter is we are not happy with the, I have to say it this way, we are not happy with the usual practice. And the point of this letter is to suggest several changes to the usual practice that will lead to enhanced governance, transparency, and accountability. That's the point.
Right.
I almost feel like in the interest of delivering the message, don't bury the lead. Like, we should probably put in a sentence that says, like, the purpose of this letter is, maybe after that sentence.
I think the one before it covers it though. This is the first before.
Yeah, we believe important lessons. So Doug, so that point has been talked about
Yeah.
at some length. And here's the thinking. you'll see, it doesn't say that we agree that their actions were in line with the regs.
I get it, we're not
It was-
poking them in the eye.
It was very, because could have said,
Could've said that.
you're not consistent with the regs.
I get it.
But the idea is, they were doing what they understood to be, standard practice, what the towns seemed for many years to be comfortable with. And I think if we wrote a letter that said, you guys have been screwing up, you've been breaking the rules,
That's not what I'm saying.
then we're gonna end up in a situation where they're gonna go into defensive mode with why they're not doing it. So, and Peter Moores and I talked about this at considerable length. And concluded that language that might seem here like it's a little softer is actually more likely to get them to say, yeah, sure, we're fine, we'll do all this, as compared to getting into a fight about, whether they did or didn't follow the regs. And the regs are pretty complicated, and the regs are not, what's the way to put this? They're not very well written. And so there's certainly scope, if everybody lawyered up, there's certainly scope saying, well, we have a different interpretation of the regs. And so we're really trying to avoid that and avoid saying to them, we're mad, you screwed up, fix it. And just say, hey, some things happened, caused some unhappiness
Yeah,
here.
so.
We want to draw some lessons from it.
I
Here are the
totally
lessons we want to draw. Hey, you guys really should agree to this. And by the way, it's coming from both towns that provide your funding. So you kind of need to agree to do this because, it's coming from everybody who provides your funding. So let's just all agree that this is how we're going to do
I
this.
completely agree with your point, and I'm sure you guys discussed this ad nauseam, that you don't want to poke them in the eye and say, listen, you screwed up, or you didn't follow the rule. That's not the point. I'm not saying that. I think it's almost like the old, tell them what you're gonna tell them, tell them what you told them. I mean, tell them what you're gonna tell them is, we would like to propose changes to the usual practices to clarify, the regulations. That's the point of this letter, right? I mean,
Yep.
in plain English,
Yep, I think so to my read, it gets there.
you think so?
Yeah, I do. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, the struggle, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I get the point that it could, be said right up front. But I think it gets there, and my concern would be that
Too bad, yeah.
language that moves in that direction is gonna feel, they're gonna feel very defensive when they get this letter. And my concern would be that the sort of language you just said, which I get the point, it just says, here's what this is about, is gonna immediately put them into defensive
So I'll
posture
withdraw that suggestion.
rather than, okay, these are some slight changes in how we do things. Fine, we're good. Let's just do this.
What's your instinct? This letter, we prove it as is. What's your instinct on the response?
I think they're gonna agree.
What's your instinct on what? If we buttonhole the committee member today, would they have any idea this is coming, that we're all upset about this?
They would. I've given folks there a heads up. And I've talked with folks there about the substance of this. And so I think they're
Any
gonna,
body language?
I think they're gonna agree to this.
Okay.
I mean, remains to be seen because the committee has to meet and they have to vote.
Got it.
But I think they're gonna, I think they're gonna say, yeah, this all makes sense. We're good. We'll do it this way.
So with no changes, or maybe with the change of asking for a response by.
Yeah, I mean,
when do you think you would get this letter out? I mean,
So
given it's a committee.
so I think the capital budget committee, Nora might, have you guys met Nora?
Briefly. So
Uh,
this wasn't
you-
really discussed.
Do you have another meeting scheduled?
I can look at my calendar, just everything's on my phone right here. May I make a motion, or are we done? Should I, anyway, no, we haven't discussed this in particular.
Okay, go ahead, Nora.
No, since you called on me, I make a motion to put that letter into action as it is.
Okay. Second, and just, so we can have some more discussion, Doug, on your point. I think the question is, how long does it take Dover to do this? They a month ago indicated by the end of September.
I mean, are they already good with this draft?
They need to, so informally, yes, but they have to formally vote and approve it. And I don't know, I haven't heard that that's happened. It was about a month ago that or 3 weeks ago, I last connected with them. They said they thought that could happen by the end of September, but here we are, September 25th. So, that may take them a little more time to do. So, the hope would be that within 2 or 3 weeks, the letter would go out. Can't promise that because there's some other moving parts.
So let's just assume that's the case for a minute. How do you feel about putting a response statement?
I think the response date's gonna be fine. I think if this gets formally approved, I think all the signatories to the letter will agree to that and without feeling there's a need to go back to committees to revote.
Yeah.
So, I've got a note here. I think it's a very nice idea. So, I think I would be one of the signatories. And I think particularly after this discussion, unless I hear something different, I'd be very comfortable making that change without coming back for a
Sure.
formal vote. And I think the other folks who'd be signing a letter would be too.
Great.
All right, any other discussion?
Just as a point of information. Has anything like this to this scope happened in the recent past?
With the cost overruns?
Yeah.
Well, the library.
Well, that was with the school.
Yeah, no, I mean, I said that almost,
Yeah.
I was hoping to get a smile from that. I said almost tongue in cheek.
I smiled, Dan.
My timing, I'm not gonna make it on stand up because my timing is horrible. So there's nothing else I know of. Jeremy, Nora, anybody else have any?
I see Sean on here. Maybe he can elaborate.
Yeah, Sean. School projects that have run significantly over budget, anything you could add? He may not be there.
No, no comment.
Okay,
I think there's been a fair amount of scope change, but nothing's run over like this.
okay, thanks, Sean. Pen,
I just want to say though, that part of the reason for the existence of this letter is E&D is by statute up to 5% of the budget. They like to keep it up there and that gives them, there are things that may have gone over that you don't know have gone over because it's just like, well, we'll just slide that 100 grand or 200 grand out of E&D. So that's one of the purposes of this.
Yeah.
And then I had a question, if we vote to approve this letter as written, can we also vote to pre-approve your adding a date change? That's
yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, we might as well. That's a good idea. We might as well, just so there isn't any confusion about that. Yeah, okay. So, Nora, you made the motion. Would you accept as a friendly amendment to your motion that for a date to be added if all the other signers of the letter are agreeable to that?
Yes.
And Pen, it was your second. You're good with that?
I am indeed.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. So, let's vote. Paul,
Aye.
Pen,
Thanks. Thanks, Dan and Peter Moore's, all the time, but this is a great letter.
thanks.
Yeah, it is. So,
And hope that it does what we want. Stephen, Nora,
Aye.
and I might as well. Okay, so 7-0. Great. Thank you. And I apologize if people felt a little jammed by the process without quite as much flexibility, but I think that's the best path to getting this done reasonably soon and off to the school committee. Okay, so I think the next thing would be approving minutes from prior meetings. So let me do another screen share. Wait 1 second. Okay, and looks like, all right, so, I will, as we usually do, I'll just scroll through this. If anybody has any, changes or edits, corrections, we'll just change it on screen. And then hopefully vote to approve. And Stephen, even though you weren't at that meeting, at your discretion, you're free to vote. You're a member of the committee, you're free to vote. If you prefer not to, that's fine. That's fine too, whatever you want to do. So let me just scroll through and please jump in with any comments or changes. Yeah.
Under liaison reports, I think we're missing the plural on that in case of a quorum of member.
Yes, and that's why it was correcting the grammar. Yes. Thank you.
Can I ask a procedural question? So I've been on a lot of boards for whatever it's worth. Usually what I see is minutes go out to the board members sometime well in
Yep.
advance of the meeting.
Yep.
You solicit with that email.
Yep.
Comments and
Yep.
edits.
Yep.
So that we're not actually doing it real time and that you've already made them or.
Yep.
Whatever. I don't
So I sent these around, I think, on Sunday.
know. Oh, okay.
I didn't get any corrections. Maybe Shelley
That's fine.
thought, it's a small thing. I'll just mention it at the meeting
Yeah,
instead of
yeah.
sending an email. So they always go out ahead of time.
Yeah.
They'd never, I would never, I mean, it doesn't,
So
nobody
as long as
wants.
we're not doing this real time, I just.
This is just catching up quick corrections.
Got it.
We're not gonna do serious editing here. Hopefully that'll
Got
be
it.
taken care of. Okay,
I
anything
make a
else?
motion to approve the minutes as written.
Okay,
I'll say.
all right, quick vote. Let's come in the other order. Shelley.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Stephen.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
Aye.
Hi. Nora.
Aye.
Okay. And I am I as well, so that gets us minutes at 6:01. Okay. Okay, I think that is all of our business, unless anybody has any other thing to
One
do.
more question.
Yep.
Now that we passed this, I'm not editing this letter. So just for my information, with the boiler project that, oh, surprise, surprise, the boiler's gonna last another 10 years. Where did that money go? It sat in an account all by its lonesome, it went to E&D, where'd it go?
Look at capital.
Yeah, so their procedure, so they have an E&D fund, which is their free cash, right? Which they accumulate if there's budget money left over at the end of the year, rolls into free cash, as Ken mentioned, that can't be more than 5% of the budget. They have
It builds every year and reaches 5%, they give it back? or what?
if it's certified at more than 5%, they have to return it to the town.
This is a state law.
State law, yep. The school committee has a policy that they want to target E&D between 3% and 4%. We, in the last 2 years, last year especially, made the case to them that we think that's more E&D than they need. And that, that's money that ultimately came from the taxpayers, and that's more E&D than they need, and they should target a lower level of E&D. We did not have tremendous success with that argument, though I think we have sensitized them, because one of the things that got said to me was, as a result of all the things talked about in this letter and the E&D that got used for this, E&D is now down. And, then we'll see, whether it stays down or starts to build up again, that I think it's somewhat under 3%.
Well, we all understand that it's actually 20 or 25% of their variable cost. 24 million of the school budget is fixed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is an argument that's come up in the past, that it's a bigger cushion than they need for an organization that has mostly fixed costs.
So back to my question.
But again,
where did the
that
boiler
is-
money go?
Where what?
Where did the boiler?
Oh,
money go?
yes. So they, thought, here's this boiler project we need to do. We need to replace the set of boilers. It's a $350,000 project. So they approved the funding of that project from E&D. So they then transferred $350,000 from E&D to capital account, which is where money sits for them when they have a pending capital project. So, you know, if they were doing a capital project and the towns borrowed, you know, we did an intermunicipal agreement and the towns borrowed, when we gave that money to them, it would land in a capital account. So it landed in that capital account. It was there for some period of time. And then they used that 350,000 to fill part of the cost, to cover part of
So
the cost.
technically, whenever the boiler project was approved, they thought they were gonna do it. It came straight out of E&D, it wasn't
Right.
approved by the towns.
Right.
That's a
Correct.
whole other issue.
But that's what this letter is gonna,
Yeah,
prevent.
no, that's.
The letter's gonna say,
that's
don't
out.
do
I got
that. Don't do that.
it. Got it.
It has to be approved by the towns.
That
And,
makes
you know,
complete
I
sense.
think, given my read of town politics, you know, probably would be approved, school project, they need new boilers, probably would be approved. But it needs to come to the town for that approval rather than being handled a different way.
That makes sense.
Okay. Unless there's anything else? Anyone with a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Ooh, Nora, that was strong.
I gotta go to a soccer game. Come on.
California.
Yeah, it looks sunny out there.
It's beautiful.
Damn it, I second that.
Thank you. And let's do a quick roll call. Nora,
Aye.
Paul, Ken, Stephen,
Aye.
Mike, Shelley,
Aye.
and I'm as well. 7:00, we are adjourned. Thank you. And I will send stuff around as soon as I can get it organized.